I give the honor of introducing tonight's speaker, Gabrielle Correales from Sequoia Mental Health Services, and she has worked with youth in various capacities for over 10 years, focusing on the needs of individuals and their unique family system, and has past experience in after-school and summer programs as well. So we are very happy that she is here and has that perspective. Um, She pursued a master's degree in social work and has continued to develop her skills in working with families in a person-centered setting, so on individuals, family, and community levels. And passion lies in educating, empowering, and supporting emotional growth on every level. So we are very happy that you're here, Gabrielle. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much. Um, my name's Gabby. Yeah, Gabrielle Correales. And I appreciate Larry and Katie, all that Washington County Kids is doing to try and help educate our families and connect within the community. So I'm looking forward to tonight. I see that we have a few families in here, and I really tried to put information in here that I think will be applicable to young kids, teens. I mean, quite honestly, effective communication is important in any capacity, whether it's with our partners, with employers, employees. And so I'm hopeful that tonight you guys will get to um, learn some kind of tips and tricks and tools that you could take home with you. I think something that I want you guys to be mindful of as we go through the information for today. This is not new information, right? This is information and skills that we all might know. We might have heard it a few times, but I'm a really big believer that we could hear something 4 or 5 times, but it's not until we're ready to hear it that we take it in. So I encourage you guys to really be mindful. As we listen today, I recognize there's a lot of other things going on in life. So take what you want. We're going to follow up at the end, like Larry said, with some questions and answers. And then also some information that you guys get to take home with you. I think an email might go out at the end and kind of go from there. So, like they said, my name's Gabby. I get to support Sequoia Mental Health Services through mental health therapy, and I work primarily with youth and their families, helping to provide group therapy and just ways to hear challenges faced and come up with some solutions. So I've kind of condensed a 10-week program into 20 minutes. So we're going to run through it. Larry, if you could go to the next slide, please. So I've put our cute little comic here. Hey, and then responding, what? I'm sure many of you guys have experienced trying to connect or communicate with somebody, and you show up one way and you are met with something completely different. Oftentimes this happens with our kids, especially if there's a device in front of their face or a toy in front of their face. So thought it might be fitting for the start of our chat tonight. So you guys, this evening, we're going to be talking about a beginner's guide to choice giving, limit setting, and empowering your child through language. I think when we look at communicating, how we communicate effectively with our kids, I really think it's important to start with something called bids or bidding. And these are ways for each of us to call attention and opportunities for us to show care and connection. A bid, something that we do with our partners, something our kids, friends, family, anyone who's trying to communicate really submits a bid. And so I kind of broke it down for you guys and helping to explain a little bit more what those are. So bids are these little requests or bids for attention. It's really this opportunity to show the care and connection. And when bids are not responded to, someone might feel rejected, They might feel unloved, not met with what they're needing. So let's take a look at some of these bids. Bids can vary. It can be a positive bid, a negative one, or a neutral bid. A positive bid might look something like, hey, look, mom, I got this really great grade on my test, right? Or a positive bid might look like, dad, can I hold your hand? Or can we cuddle, right? Something where I want a positive reaction from you. And then we have some negative bids, and negative bids might be something like maybe not cleaning toys up after playing, or maybe storming off and stomping feet as they walk away. Oftentimes, negative bids are met with, why didn't you clean your room? Or why didn't you do the thing? So there's these calls for attention, and then it's often met with some kind of negative response. And then sometimes we have neutral bids. Neutral bids might be moments of not responding to a person altogether. So maybe being distracted by our devices, or quite frankly, everything that's going on in our life. So I think in order for us to really start talking about how do we communicate effectively, it's important for us to understand, what is this communication piece? What are bids, and how do we get to be really present and connect with that person? So I have listed here 6 kind of areas that we'll go through today. We're going to start by discussing communicating the 4 main tenets, setting limits, giving choice, reacting to meltdowns, something that maybe we've all experienced, and then shame versus guilt, and the importance of play. Those are kind of the hot topics that we're going to hit for today, and we can kind of cruise through that. So Larry, if you could go to that next slide, please. So when we look at communicating the 4 main tenets, this is something that I really like to stress. I think communicating effectively means connecting wholly. So communication is not a one-way street. It's not being talked at. It's not being just listened to. There's so many more aspects of this. You know, we hear a lot about verbal communication, nonverbal communication, eye contact, body language. These are all aspects of communicating. And I've kind of broken it down here to the 4 main tenets of how we get to really be intentional with how we communicate those things with our people, our tribe, if you will. So the first one that I want to point out is this I see you piece. I see you is really helpful in being displayed through tracking and narrating. Tracking and narrating can often look like verbalizing what you're seeing. So, for example, I see that you're grabbing the ball. I see that you're playing with the toy. I see that you're playing with the board game that I got. Oh, I see that you're caring for that little stuffy if they're smaller kids, right? It's just that simple. The way we get to communicate I see you to our kids is through tracking and narrating. Sometimes it can feel a little silly for us to do. And I talk about this a lot with my families, that it is different than maybe what we grew up with or what we're used to. But this moment to really be present is helpful in increasing our tracking and narrating. The second piece is the I hear you piece. This can look like reflection, active listening, or repeating maybe. I want to kind of continue maybe with this stuffy scenario, but we might say something like, oh, I hear that the stuffy is sick. Where often this can prompt another response, right? So if we are visually seeing that the child is putting a thermometer in the stuffy's mouth, right? That's when we can make that reflection, right? And kind of help to kind of parrot back what the child might say. Oh, well, the stuffy had a long day and is not feeling great. And this is really helping to connect this I hear you piece. Next, we have I understand. And I think this is really critical in communication and the communication process. And it's really often missed. Um, when we're connecting with our children, life is moving so quickly around us. And this I understand piece is this validation piece. And so I want you guys to really try and keep in mind when you're trying to reflect, I understand. We can think about a statement of, it makes sense that you feel blank when blank, right? It makes sense that you feel really upset when I ask you to put your toys away. It makes sense that you feel really angry that we have to get our shoes on and head out the door. To validate somebody's feelings, I mean, we as adults all appreciate being validated. We all appreciate being understood. And oftentimes we get into this mode of go, go, go with, especially with our kids, or how can I fix it? That sometimes just sitting with it is really helpful. And this last piece when communicating these four main tenets is the I care piece. I care is, it really encourages this notion of I'm here, I'm present with you. Um, Again, it's a fairly simple task, maybe something that we maybe think we're doing or we do sometimes, but this really can be clouded by the chaos of everything going on and kind of meeting the needs of the family unit. So, expressing that you care can look something like having devices put away. A phrase that I really like to use with my families and also with my kids, all of the kids that I get to support here at Sequoia, is our toes should follow our nose. So it's something really, really simple, right? Like if our toes are faced this way, our nose is faced this way. I am guilty of it, and I'm sure y'all experience, right? Cooking, getting things ready, doing things, and someone talks to us, and it's like, yeah, sure, right? And our toes are not following our nose in those moments. And so, really being mindful of when we're communicating with somebody, we want the eye contact, we want that connection, we want to know that we have that person's attention, and our kids are exactly the same. So, I think can communicating these four main tenets, right? I see you, I hear you, I understand, and I care. Uh, we find are often really helpful. Larry, if you'd go to the next slide. Awesome, thank you. So setting healthy limits, this is kind of this next slide, and I think it goes along with our four main tenets. Those will be thread throughout this entire slide deck, you guys, but setting healthy limits means setting boundaries. And communicating effectively means setting boundaries that are clear, that are safe. When we set limits, we allow for exploration that's guided, but also increasing our children's self efficacy. Self efficacy is the person's ability to perform specific tasks, achieve goals. It helps us build this sense of self. And often, when we can explore within healthy limits and healthy boundaries, we are very, very successful. Something I want you guys to think about is setting expectations. Explaining the why can really help your child to build understanding and recognition of safety. A lot of times, as parents, it can be automatic, and again, as partners, because I said so, because I'm the adult. Right. And when we're able to explain the why, we get to help explain to our kids and our partners kind of all the behind the scenes, give a little bit of insight into what's going on, so that our kids get to really be fully present with us and understand that. And, encouraging exploration that is safe and structured helps to form a really solid team between you and your child, which we find encourages this greater connection and ability to communicate. I think when I put some examples here, you guys, of and maybe some different age ranges, but this first one, the ball is not for throwing at the wall. The pillow is for throwing out the wall, right? We get to maybe figure out and get creative as to what that looks like, but really setting healthy limits. When we can know the boundaries, we now get to kind of play within that space and understand, how do we push it a little bit? How do we remain safe? Another example I have here is your device is not to be used during family time. Your device is to be used during downtime, right? So, again, setting those limits. When we don't set limits or expectations, and then we get frustrated that these people in our life are not meeting the limits or expectations, um, it can be a little bit confusing. And so I really encourage that for you guys. Next, we have giving choice. And I think this flows really nicely with setting limits. Limits are important, they're critical to our development and our well being. And choice is so, so important to have right there with it. And, if we look at young people, we can recognize that their entire world is dictated by others, right? Maybe grandma, grandpa has to wake them up, parents wake them up, caregiver, whoever that may be. Wake up, brush your teeth, get in the shower, have your breakfast, get on the bus. Then they get on the bus and get in line, and it continues on throughout their whole day, right? And none of us like to be told what to do, I'm sure, 24/7. And the same goes for our children, right? I think the ability to give choice is really allowing them to understand the world's not just happening to them, um, but rather they're a part of it, right? And that this is helping build their sense of self. So it can be really challenging and dysregulating when we're constantly kind of told where to be, what to do. So ensure choice and opportunities to make decisions, supports for growth and autonomy, and a greater sense of self. I put some examples here, you guys. If we're going to kind of stick with this ball scenario, the ball is not for throwing at the wall, the pillow is for throwing at the wall. That's where we were when we were setting those healthy limits. But now, when we get to incorporate the choice, that's when we get to say, if you choose to throw the ball at the wall, you choose to lose the ball for the rest of the day, the week, right? We're now starting to help them realize that they have some autonomy within this setting. My biggest tip, you guys, would be to stick to your choices. I encourage you, if you're going to kind of set this consequence, that there's follow through, which is really, really challenging. But what's really important with giving choice is that you do get to stick to your choices and you get to stick to that limit that you set and the follow through. So I put another funny little picture here. I'll text her to put her phone down and eat. Maybe this is something you guys have experienced, maybe not, but I strongly encourage, first of all, I always encourage family time as much as you guys can. It's an important moment to connect. But I put this on here because if you're going to be texting your daughter to put the phone down, or your son, or the device, or whatever it is, I encourage you guys to follow those rules yourself. This is it's important to know that you're here. Again, your toes are following your nose, you're being present, and we get to do that by mimicking those behaviors. And so I sit in rooms often with young people who are like, well, my mom's on her phone all the time, right? Or anytime I talk to my parents, they're on some kind of device. So why do I have to get off my device? Again, you are the parent, you get to make that choice. But if we want to increase that communication and that connection point, this is a really great opportunity to do so. So I've put a slide in here, you guys, on shame and guilt. I think we could have an entire session on the importance of shame versus guilt, to be totally honest with you, but just a really quick snippet. Shame is I am wrong. Shame says I inherently am wrong. I'm a bad person. I'm a bad guy. I deserve fill in the blank. And guilt is I did something wrong. And so when we look at how we're communicating these things, it's important to recognize and understand the difference. So if shame is I did the bad, I am a bad person. Guilt is I did a bad thing. I made a poor decision. But we can come back from that. We can come back and grow from doing something wrong. We can't really come back and grow from being wrong, right? And so I really want you guys to be mindful. I put an example down here. You know, what you were doing, you should have known better, right? Maybe we've all said this kind of statement. You should have known better. And maybe next time we could try, you did something wrong, you made a choice, and next time you can choose a different one, right? Does that kind of make sense? This first one is helping to really instill this deep down in my core. I should have known and I still didn't choose. Where if we try this next option, you did something wrong and you made a choice, and now I get to kind of make it better, right? And I want to be also realistic here, you guys. This doesn't mean that there won't be any consequences to actions. It doesn't mean that we can't tell our kids no. That's not at all what I'm saying. I just am really encouraging that maybe the next time when presented with a challenge that our kid faces, that we get to help them recognize they had choices in the matter, right? But we can't have that conversation without threading through those four main tenets of I see you, I hear you, I care, and I understand. Oh, reacting to meltdowns. I like to have this here. I talk a lot with my families about how do I react to the meltdown, right? How do I support my kid in this moment? And I think it's really important for us to recognize how triggering a meltdown can be for us, how overwhelming the whole thing can be. And especially if you're in a public setting, in a public space, forget about it. It can feel like all eyes are maybe on us, and I have to do something. But what I really want to try and encourage you guys is a phrase that I really like: set the temperature, don't take the temperature. And what I mean by this is in a room, maybe you hear your kids fighting and arguing or losing a game and having a meltdown. And we enter into this room and we're at a level 10 right there with them, right? And that instance is when we are taking the temperature. But rather, if we walk into that room and we set the temperature, that might look like slowing things down. Maybe we start to whisper. Maybe we have a calmer voice. Maybe we get to put our hands on their shoulder, their arm. That's something that you get to figure out with your kids. How do they like to be connected to? You know, as the parent, the caretaker, it's absolutely your responsibility to set the temperature, not take the temperature. And we find oftentimes that we kind of get into this cycle, this pattern where our kids are always setting the temperature, but that is not their responsibility. Right? And I think, you know, starting with these observations and being able to get down on their level is really helpful. And I think another kind of phrase of setting the temperature, don't take the temperature, that's one version, but another is monkey see, monkey do, right? We've all heard that. And really often, if we're very escalated and frustrated and meet them at a 10, it remains there. right? And so we want to try and bring that down. Really continuing to communicate our four main tenets and why this is so important. And so, I'm a sucker for analogies. I've been kind of using them all evening, but I think especially when working with young people, analogies help us visualize and really connect with information. And so I like to use them with my families and kids. Um, these are donuts, and I don't know anyone who doesn't like a donut, right? And I like this analogy um, because I've never heard of a person going up to a donut and complaining that there's a circle in the middle of it, a hole, if you will, that there's an entire piece of this missing, right? We are so focused on the delicious goodness of the outside of that donut. So we're really focused on the hole. We don't even look at that hole, right? And it's pretty ironic that this is the same word and they mean two completely different things. But what often happens in our busy lives, and the real challenges faced, you guys, we sometimes get very focused on that hole, that missing piece. And when we continue to focus on that missing piece, what's not working, the challenges we're facing, continuing to answer those negative bids, we kind of miss out on that whole deliciousness of it all. And so I really, really encourage you guys to try and focus on those positive bids. Really focus on the outside of that donut. And I always encourage my families when I get to meet with them all as a group. Um, I give this analogy to the kids and the adults, and I always encourage them to call each other out in a safe way about when maybe you're focusing on the whole and not the whole. And kind of a fun play of, we are trying to really be better and focus on those positive bids. This is something I practice within my personal life, and it's helpful really to kind of call somebody out with a donut. It can lower the intensity of it. So, you guys, I think this last piece here is play. I really want to encourage you guys to engage, observe, and connect. Um, we can look at play often as something that's not so necessary, but I am here to tell you it's so necessary. Um, what happens often when parents bring their kids in to meet with me is I get to sit down and play with them. But through our play, we get to really, really connect and develop this, again, our four main tenets. I see you, I hear you, I understand, and I care in a safe way. Um, I encourage you guys to change your questions to observations, right? Did you have a good day? Can result in a yes or a no answer. And then it kind of stops. But maybe an observation might look like, you seem like you had a tough day today, or you seem like you had a really great day today, and really allows for this kind of open ended conversation. Um, but I think this ability to play, and play can look really different for different ages. For our young kids, it could be really simple, um, playing Legos, playing Barbie. And it's kind of funny, I have this conversation with families that play is hard. I don't know the last time anyone played with dolls. It's hard to do, you guys, or played with cars. It's difficult to tap into this piece. But if we're able to communicate those things, the I see you piece, all that we're doing is reflecting. All that we're doing is narrating. So it's not even really us coming up with that imagination. We just get to voice what we're seeing. And for older kids, I often encourage families to um, have your teens, your older folks, to help educate you on something that they love in this moment in their life. So sometimes they're playing video games that you might have zero idea what's going on. But being able to ask them, hey, I'm going to sit down with you. Can you teach me how to play this? It's an opportunity for them to be the expert in the thing and to help connect and communicate with you in a bigger way. And I really think you guys would be surprised as to what you find comes from those conversations. Um, I have a TED talk here that I was hoping we could maybe play. It's about 10 minutes, and she speaks, I think, really eloquently on this. And I don't need to fix what's not broken. Larry, I can't hear anything. I don't know if anyone else can.
Okay, you're having no volume.
I can't hear it either.
Ambitious
No?
Excel document to track the things I thought mattered most for my student.
We can hear it now. Thank you.
Oh, you
Yeah, it's
can.
fine.
Yeah,
it's
if you
fine.
would restart it, please.
Okay, perfect.
"15 years ago, I walked into a classroom as a first year.
Oh, now we can't hear it.
With what I know now, I wish I wouldn't have bothered with Excel or rote memorization. I wish instead I had leveraged the power of brain building interactive play. For years, we've known that play-based learning is far superior to rote memorization. Harvard Center on the Developing Child tells us, as well as countless other institutions, that play, and especially the back and forth interactions, the serve and return, the alternating comments, questions, gestures between children and adults when they play together, that's what helps build neural connections in the child's brain. And in particular, they build the brain's prefrontal cortex. That's the executive control center of the brain, the part that manages emotions, solves problems, makes plans, all things that children have to do when they play. So when we think of it that way, play is actually hard work. If learning is like a workout for the brain, then play-based learning is the heavy lifting. And just as heavy lifting builds muscle, play-based learning builds the brain's architecture. So then where do us as grown-ups come in? It's those interactions when a child says something and a parent or teacher says something back. Those interactions help the child to persist, to stick with their plan, to keep rebuilding the block tower each time it falls. So it's the play paired with the adult interactions. It's like superfood for the brain. The research community's support of play is so resounding, I would expect to see children in nearly every household, every preschool and kindergarten classroom playing for most of their waking hours. But that's far from reality. We don't see widespread uptake of play among parents or teachers, and sometimes we even see resistance. So what's going on? What's driving us as parents and teachers to ignore the overwhelming research when it comes to play? After years of teaching preschool, coaching teachers, coaching parents, and analyzing my own parenting, I've realized our best intentions are getting in the way. We live in a comparison culture, and we worry that our child won't be good enough. Won't be good enough for the soccer team, won't be ready for kindergarten, won't be as smart as their classmates. And we worry that if our child doesn't measure up, it will be our fault. Our hyper focus on our children and our students' success is backfiring. and it's exacerbated by two forces I see impacting the large majority of parents and teachers. First, the need for immediate gratification and quick results. And second, our own discomfort with play, either because we don't have the time or energy, or because we just don't know how to play anymore. On the topic of immediate gratification, I think back to that Excel document I created as a first-year teacher. That document was the manifestation of my anxiety. Because often when we feel anxious or out of control, we revert back to what we can control. For parents and teachers, we often revert to fact-based teaching because we see pretty immediate results that affirm our efforts. Whereas we can't see the connections in the child's brain that fire when they finally get that wobbly block tower to stay standing. The immediate result of something like our child learning a new letter, it gives us this dopamine rush that then sets off a flywheel effect, because as we see and feel the results of our work more and more, we subconsciously begin to prioritize that type of teaching. Recently, my staff was coaching a group of school principals on the importance of play. And one of the principals said that his teachers just weren't on board. They said their students are too far behind to play. And those well-intentioned teachers, they were equating academic learning that their students needed with methods that would show quick, concrete results. They felt really proud and accomplished when they could talk to the students' parents and say how many letters and numbers they learned that month. Because we as parents and teachers, we share this universal desire for our kids to do well. And we will pour our energy and resources into making that happen. And that's showing up in our spending habits. Marketers are preying on it as they advertise the latest and greatest toys, flashcards, iPad apps for brain development, even kits that claim to teach your baby to read. Seriously, babies. And because we worry that our kids won't measure up, we fall prey to that. The global market for educational toys surpassed $68 billion in 2021 and is projected to reach $132 billion by 2028. But those smart toys, they're a far cry from the interactive, playful learning that I was talking about earlier. That type of learning, the real gold standard of early education, it's not immediate. It takes time, and it doesn't lend itself to a checklist or an Excel document. The second force I see negatively impacting play-based learning is that we, as grown-ups, parents, and teachers, just don't always like hearing that play-based learning might require some of us. Because that means it will take time, energy, and skills that we don't think we have. But not only is it worth our time, it can be done in really small doses. So take this simple example of bath time. If I'm a busy mom who has a few extra dollars to spend, I might pop my kiddo into the tub, remember that buying bath toys has been on my never-ending mental to-do list for weeks. So I whip out my phone and I use that 5 minutes to go over to Amazon and buy the top-rated bath toys. And I'm not here to say that those bath toys are harmful for your child. They're not. But you're busy. So what you do with that 5 to 10 minutes, it matters. And you know what would be way better than scrolling Amazon, and even better than those bath toys? 3 things that I can almost guarantee you have in your home: measuring cups, kitchen sponges, and you. Because a couple household materials, thank you, dropped into the bathtub, and this mundane routine becomes fun and surprisingly energizing bonding time for you and your child. And bonus, instead of the manufacturer designed toy telling your child how to play, your child's brain has to do the heavy lifting. And that's that superfood for the brain. Now, over the past 10 years coaching parents, I have heard over and over again that parents don't feel good enough at their job at parenting. And there's so much pressure on us. And sometimes it feels like we're supposed to innately know how to get down on the floor and build our baby's brains. And over the past few years, the social media world has exploded with even more advice for parents and teachers. How to affirm children's feelings, but still set clear boundaries. 15 ways to use a cardboard box in your classroom. And DIY Halloween costumes that are sure to win the school costume contest. And as I rattle those off, I could just imagine the rolling eyes from parents and teachers. And I share that frustration because sometimes all the chatter only makes us feel more pressured to get it right. When it comes to our children's learning, though, we don't have to be the perfect Etsy parent or the perfect Pinterest teacher. We have to prioritize interactions and be okay with them being imperfect. Because it may seem silly to admit that we don't feel good at playing with our kids, but as adults, it's not always intuitive. Sure, most of us played a lot when we were little. We'd tie the blankets around our neck and bound around the house like superheroes. But as we grew up, that type of play wasn't encouraged anymore. And just as with any skill that we don't use, we risk losing it. A couple months ago, my colleague and we were leading a workshop for parents and teachers. And we brought materials like shaving cream and plastic straws and buttons and pipe cleaners and just asked the parents and teachers to play, to create. Everyone froze. Then slowly but surely, people started to create. And by the end of the session, their faces were lighting up as they shared their creations with the rest of the group. And it reminded me that as adults, we have to let go of our expectation that we get it right. Because if we opt out of play, based on what we know about how important our interactions are to children's development, if we opt out of play, it has major implications for their brain development. Now I know that finding the energy to play with our kids and students can be hard. Even in small doses, it takes our undivided attention. But it's so worth it because in all my experience and research, I haven't found any evidence that making the homemade cookies for the school bake sale matters for your child's brain development. I haven't found any evidence that sewing that winning Halloween costume means they'll do well in school. But what does matter is that the interactions leave space for your child to learn, to persist, to play, to experiment. You have the power to have an enormous impact on their brain development. You are helping build the network of neural connections that lay the foundation for all of their future learning. So this week at bath time, I hope that you'll put aside the top-rated toys, forget that mental to-do list for a moment, grab some measuring cups, some kitchen sponges, and give it a try. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Yeah, so
Mm.
you guys, I mean, this video, I think sums it up nicely. This, even if bath time is not it for you, if your children are older than that, we get to find these small moments. We often are kind of asked by parents to help fix these problems that come up and these challenges that they're facing at home or at school. And, we're not necessarily fixing problem behaviors here in therapy and or when they're working with a specialist, but rather we just help build these positive interactions, positive connections and communication, and these moments to be more present within the home, within your partnership, within your children. And that's kind of, I hope, the takeaway of today is working on building that relationship. I think maybe we have some time for some questions and answers. Is that right? Larry and
Yes,
QA?
absolutely. So if you have a question, feel free to unmute and ask it, or you can put it in the chat or QA, whatever you'd prefer. And I'm also going to put a survey up, a quiz. So if you can do that while we're during this section, that would be fantastic. That'll be up in just a moment. Okay. Okay, so hopefully that poll popped up for everyone.
I saw that.
Um, let's see here. Am I muted? No. So, Gabby, I will never look at a donut the same way. First of all,
Good. Yeah, that's great.
I also have to say my youngest is a high school sophomore. And it just, yeah, I'm just like, wow, flashing back to how important what you just talked about is. I knew it was fun. I knew all the little moments were fantastic, but hearing what the impact that it actually has on them for development, kind of that reinforcement is fantastic.
Uh-huh.
Um,
And I think especially, I mean, when we look at our after school programs, especially helping to continue that play, right? So often, um, sometimes people think like, well, there's not enough structure in the thing. But sometimes that's exactly perfect, right? And kind of how we talked earlier, that there's so much structure within our children's lives that sometimes that's exactly what's needed.
um, I was going to ask you, so in your practice, and I guess I was just curious about your practice and then what you, I don't know, other ways that you think that, that you're able to help kids and families. Maybe if you wanted to elaborate on that a little bit.
I think, a piece of this is something that I'm always trying to encourage my families to participate in is group therapy. And that is something, or group moments. I think oftentimes what I hear from each individual family, I find myself having the same conversations truly over and over again. And so finding a space where families get to connect with other families, they're the experts, right? And I always share that with my families that I have some tips and tricks. And like I had mentioned in the beginning, sometimes we hear something over and over and we're just not ready to hear it. And or it comes from somebody else, right? I'm sure many of you have experienced, no matter your child's age, um, telling them to do something, asking them to do something, and then a friend mentions it, and it's like the most brilliant idea, right? Or their favorite aunt or uncle mentions it, and it's like, well, I've been saying that to you this whole time. And so I think that that is really impactful. And so here at Sequoia, and that's not unique to Sequoia, there's so many agencies here in the Washington County area who have both individual therapy, but group therapy as well for parents to connect with other parents and kind of hear the realistic approach and what can be helpful and what works.
So we have a question. What to do if the kids prefer technology to human interaction? And this is really a common issue.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, what to do if kids prefer technology to human interaction? That's where I really encourage you guys to lean into setting boundaries, right? I think this is something we could all align with at times where we just want to kind of revert back and watch the show or play the game. But we know how impactful and important play and connection is being outside. So we get to set that boundary, right? And it's again kind of setting this temperature. This is the expectation, and this is how people will show up, right? And so I think with your kids, it's important that you are clear and firm, again, with that follow through on what that expectation is. And they will be okay. They really will. I have some families who have actually had a lot of challenge with um, asking their kids to do something when the TV is on. Oh, I can't do it. I don't want to pause my show. All the things, right? We all might have heard. And they decided to take the TV out of the living room. And their daughter learned how to knit within like 3 days. So it's going to be challenging for sure anytime we switch things up. But when we get to have that follow through, we really get to see some juicy goodness come from it.
Awesome. Any other questions or comments from our attendees?
Any other issues you want to bring up? I think it's hard, to think, but probably each of us has situations with kids that, it's difficult to deal with. I heard of some kids lately who are having more problems with immediate gratification. They'll do a meltdown if they don't get their way. Any ideas on that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the meltdowns, we have to move slowly, right? I don't ever encourage families to make like a sweeping change across the board. But we often find that when we get to increase the connections and these moments with each other, the I see you, I hear you, I care, and I understand, that these challenging or kind of problem behaviors often minimize. And so, no, there's no one answer. To be totally honest, I think when it comes to these meltdowns, but rather developing that trust and safety with your kids where you get to honor those moments and you get to move through them a little bit quicker. And then we start to see them fall off.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, no, another question. Do you think playing with our kids will lead them to being more cooperative?
Yeah, I think this is again opportunities for this kind of monkey see, monkey do, right? You give a little, I get to give a little. And um when we look at parenting styles, it's really important that we are giving them this why, right? And so when we get to play, we get to have safe structure and ability to kind of build that trust and connection, where then we often find that they feel more comfortable and more willing to do these other things, knowing that, well, we did just play for however long, or we get to connect and play in those other moments. Play often is kind of going back to these bids. It's honoring those positive bids and really getting connect with kids in that way. And so we find that those other challenging behaviors start to fall off.
So does anybody have any suggestions on possible games you can play with kids? Because there's not, what we're talking about here is probably for older kids. One suggestion I have is dominoes. That's an easy game to play with kids of all ages. Any other suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. When we look at, I'm a huge proponent, no matter the kid's age, for them to help educate you on whatever game is their favorite at the moment, whether it's a video game or a board game or their favorite imaginary game. Even cooking. I have a lot of kids who love cooking. And I encourage parents to have the kid lead in the kitchen. So it depends on the age again, but moments for those positive connections.
That's great. Gabby, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you all joining in and your questions.
Thank you.